Number 5, and probably the most important tip for success that I have found when growing Brussels sprouts, once they get up and going, you want to hammer. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a wonderful day. It is Sunday, October 13th here in South Georgia, and on today's video we're going to get some Brussels sprouts planted right here in a raised bed behind me. I'm going to give you 7 really good tips for growing Brussels sprouts in your backyard garden. Then we're going to check on our carrots over there, see how they germinated, and stay tuned for the end of the video. I'm going to give you a little update on our video schedule going forward. So a video or two ago, we got some cool season transplants in the ground, been keeping those watered, trying to keep those happy until they can get some roots established in their new soil here. And it looks like all our transplants survived the transition except this one darker boar kale plant here. Not quite sure what happened to that one there, but I've got backups in the greenhouse. I'll put another one in its place. So in those 3 rows there, we got collards, kale, several different types of cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower in the ground, but we've yet to plant any Brussels sprouts, which is one of my favorite things to grow during the cooler months now that I've gotten the hang of it. So today we're going to be putting some transplants in this little round raised bed here. And I'm going to use that bed because we really only got 5 decent looking Brussels sprout transplants here. I think we started 9 cells in a seed tray, but some of them got leggy on me and I wasn't able to save them, but we do have 5 good ones. And I think 5 plants will still be plenty. Last year it seems like we had around 10 plants or so, and we had more than enough. So we'll roll with 5 plants. We may end up starting some more in the greenhouse pretty soon, have another round coming in behind what we're going to be planting today. Now before we put those plugs in the ground, let's talk about these 7 tips that should help you be able to grow your own Brussels sprouts in your backyard garden, and then we'll demonstrate some of those tips as we plant here in a minute. So tip number 1, when it comes to Brussels sprouts, I would highly recommend choosing a hybrid variety. I've done some side-by-side comparisons over the years, and the hybrid varieties always outperform the older open pollinated varieties. Most people aren't letting Brussels sprouts grow all the way to the seed stage anyway. Not a lot of people are saving Brussels sprout seeds, so there's not a huge advantage to growing those open pollinated varieties anyway, except for the fact that the seeds are probably a little cheaper. But when it comes to Brussels sprouts, you will get more bang for your buck with those hybrid varieties. There's some good ones out there. The one we're planting today is called Augustus. We've grown one in the past called Dagan that did really good. There's several of them out there, but it's worth spending a little extra money on some hybrid seeds. You'll get better performance out of those. Tip number 2, you don't want to direct seed Brussels sprouts. You want to transplant them much like you would all their relatives in the brassica family: cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, all those things. Now these aren't the best looking Brussels sprout transplants that I've ever grown, but I think they'll be just fine. So you want to start them from seed in a controlled environment, whether that be your seed starting room inside your house or a greenhouse. Going to give them a much better head start than just directly sowing them in your garden. Number 3, you want to plant them in the fall once the temperatures cool down a little bit. You don't want these things experiencing a lot of temperatures in the 80s. Some days where it gets in the low 80s just for a couple hours, that'll be just fine, but you don't want them experiencing really warm temperatures. And generally speaking, Brussels sprouts are known to be cold tolerant down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that will vary a little bit from one variety to the next and depend a little bit on the environmental conditions, how moist your soil is, those kinds of things. But they're really cold tolerant, so most people can plant them in the fall and grow them through the winter like we do. Number 4, you want to make sure you add a relatively balanced fertilizer when you put those plugs in the ground, much like we did the other day when we planted all those other brassicas. We'll be using the granular coop grow today. You could use some synthetic granular fertilizer, you could use some liquid fertilizer and do a soil drench, but just put something relatively balanced in the ground when you put them in there. Number 5, and probably the most important tip for success that I have found when growing Brussels sprouts, once they get up and going, you want to hammer them with nitrogen. So we'll be using some NatureSafe 1300 because that's what I have on hand. Be using that once our transplants start to take off a little bit and start to grow. Any straight nitrogen fertilizer should work, but you just really got to feed them that nitrogen to get some good production out of them. Number 6, don't mess with the leaves. Now, this is contrary to what you'll see on some other YouTube videos or from some other content creators, but we've tested this quite a bit over the years, and it just doesn't seem to matter whether you crop those leaves on the side or cut the top off the plant. So we no longer mess with the leaves. Some of those bottom leaves will fall off as the plant grows, but I would recommend not touching the leaves at all. Just let the plant grow. And number 7, you want to harvest the Brussels sprouts as they develop into a nice size, as opposed to waiting until the entire stalk fills out and harvesting the entire stalk at one time. Now, I know that stalk of sprouts is a really pretty thing to have. We used to grow them like that when we were selling Brussels sprouts, but what happens is some of those ones at the bottom, they end up getting too big and they can end up looking a little scraggly. So it's better to just go in there and pluck off the ones at the bottom as they develop and get to the right size, and just kind of work your way up the ladder there. You'll get a lot more high quality sprouts that way. All right, so let's get some planted here. I could probably put more than 5 plants in this bed here, but I think 5 plants will be a good number for this little 4-foot diameter round bed. We've already got irrigation in here, and just a few minutes ago I had some marigold plants in here, but they weren't rebounding very well after being pruned for the 5th or 6th time, so I figured we'd cut them out and put something good in here for the cooler months. So let's start by making some little holes here where each plant is going to go. Now, ideally you want to give each Brussels sprout plant about 1 square foot of space. They're going to have more than that just putting 5 plants in this bed here, but something to consider. And we got to work around these old marigold stumps a little bit there. I like to leave those roots in the ground if I can, so if we start digging in a spot where there's a marigold stump, I'll just scoot over a little bit. And there we go. That space in there should be more than adequate. 2 plants on this side and 3 plants on that side. Next thing we want to do is add our pre-plant fertilizer. We want to put some of this Coop Grow kind of in and around each of these holes there. With a bed like this, a smaller bed, we could have also pulled our irrigation out, just sprinkled it over the entire bed and mixed it in the soil a little bit. Several ways to do this, but today we're just going to put it around each hole here. And that should be pretty good there. Then we'll take our 5 Gustus Brussels sprout plants here, which have a decent little root ball on them, and we'll just tuck them into those holes nicely there. For some of these transplants that are a little bit leggy, I might plant those a little deeper than normal, but not too deep. Looks pretty good right there. Let me go ahead and knock out these other 3. And now that we've got that knocked out, let's go over here and check on our carrots. But before we do, check out these beautiful Savannah mustard greens right here. Man, that makes me hungry just looking at that. I could harvest them right now, but I'm going to let them get a little bit bigger. That way we can have a nice big old pot of greens for our first fall greens meal. But man, they're looking really good. No pest damage so far. Couldn't be happier with that bed there. Anyways, here's our carrot bed, and as you can see, hopefully there, they germinated pretty well for us. We kept the bed consistently moist for about 7 or 8 days, and that's when they started emerging. Didn't get kind of complete emergence till about 10 days or so. Just initial observations here. I wish they were planted a little thicker. I think they'll be fine. I was just scared because last year I was too heavy-handed and planted them too thick, so I probably planted them a little too light here, but it'll be okay. Once these plants grow up a little bit, it'll be a nice full lush bed of carrots. And one important thing to mention here that I don't think I talked about in that carrot planting video, you don't want to plant your carrot seeds in an area with some really high weed pressure, because those carrots take so long to get up and going. If you've got a lot of weed pressure, those weeds are going to outpace your carrot seedlings, and you're going to end up having a mess because you can't really weed in between those seedlings when they're so tiny and delicate. So pick a spot with fairly low weed pressure to plant your carrots, and you'll be glad you did. And very soon I'm going to plant some more carrots right here, but not those same varieties. So we had a viewer, and his name escapes me at the moment. I apologize. It's on the envelope sitting in my office. Anyway, a viewer sent us a nice little bag of carrot seeds. Evidently he had planted quite a few different varieties and let them all cross-pollinate, and he says this mixture he has does pretty good. So that's what we're going to plant in that bed. Much like we did the other bed, it'll just be a combination of different varieties. It should be exciting to see what comes out of it. And before we go, as promised, let me give a very important update on our video schedule going forward. So since the inception of this channel 3 or so years ago, we've done 3 videos a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 p.m. I think over that 3-year period, we may have skipped 1 or 2 weeks, but it's been pretty consistent for the last 3 years. And I told myself, I also told my wife, that once we got to 100,000 subscribers, I was going to dial back to 2 videos a week. Now, why that 100,000 number matters, I don't really know. That's just kind of a goal I set for when I would dial back. Subscribers nowadays don't really mean anything. It's a vanity metric. You know, there's channels that have tons of subscribers that don't get a lot of views per videos. Anyways, that's a completely different discussion. But I had told myself once we got to 100,000, we were going to go to 2 videos a week. But I'm going to have to call it a little early. Just gotten so busy lately with football 3 or 4 days a week. I got a lot of fig propagation coming up. So we're no longer going to be able to do 3 videos a week. And I debated for a while whether to pull that Wednesday video or to pull the Friday video, but I think with my schedule, it's going to work best to have videos posted on Monday and Friday. Same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. We just won't have a video on Wednesday in the middle of the week anymore. So I appreciate your understanding as we dial back a little bit. The change was inevitable. It's just coming a little sooner than I had expected it to come. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the Brussels sprout content today, and let me know in the comments below if you're growing Brussels sprouts in your garden this winter. And if you missed that video where we talked about how to plant carrots and how to get them to germinate well, you can find that right here. We'll walk you through all the tips and tricks to getting a nice stand of carrots in your backyard garden. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.